Lesson 21. In this presentation, we'll be taking a look at some special constructions like correlatives and hoste plus the indicative and the infinitive. Correlatives are families of words that have similar meanings but sometimes different forms depending on whether they are used in questions or answers, etc. For example, the correlative what kind in English we see in a direct question like what kind is he? An indirect question like I said what kind he is. As a demonstrative pronoun, he is such a kind. And even as a relative pronoun, such as he is. Now, these are all related words, basically referring to the same kind of thing, the same aspect of a thing, from different perspectives, from the perspective of a direct question, indirect question, etc. So they're all related. They are all members of a family of words. They are correlatives, correlative pronouns. In Greek, correlatives have unique forms. If you noticed from the English here, we, at least in direct questions and indirect questions, what kind, have the same form for this correlative. In Greek, however, we see different forms in each case. For example, the correlative pronoun poios, poion, what kind, this is the Greek equivalent of the English what kind. In a direct question, we see poios is he, the poios there. As an indirect question, we see I said ha poios, he is. So we've gone from poios in the direct question to ha poios with the ha added. This ha is often added when we make basically an indirect question out of a direct question, added to the correlative pronoun. As a demonstrative, we would see he is toiutas. So quite a bit different here, but basically part still of the same family of words. And as a relative, such hoias, he is, such as he is. So these are all the Greek equivalents of those English phrases. These words, poios, hapoios, toiutas, hoias, are all related. They're correlative pronouns. Another example is pasas, how much, or, in the plural, how many. Pasoi esin hoi polemioi. Literally, how many are the enemy? That is, how many of the enemy are there? How many are they in number? Legemoi ha posoi esin hoi polemioi. So tell me how many the enemy are. In English, our word order has changed in that last part there because this is one of the ways we show that this is an indirect question rather than a direct question, even though we use the same phrase, how many, in both kinds of questions. But as you notice from the Greek, we've gone from pasoi in the direct question to ha pasoi in the indirect question. How many are the enemy? Pasoi esin hoi polemioi. And how many, tell me how many the enemy are. Legemoi ha posoi esin hoi polemioi. We also see tas u toi esin hoi polemioi. So this is not a question, neither indirect nor direct. So many are the enemy. The enemy are so many in number. And this could have different meanings depending on the context, but we are calling attention to how great the number of the enemy is. We also see tasu toi esmen hasoi esin hoi polemioi. Literally, we are so many. Tasu toi esmen. Esmen is the first person plural of I am. We are so many as hasoi, the enemy are esin hoi polemioi. The thing to notice here is that we actually have two correlatives being used, form of tasutas and hasas, both calling attention to the number, in the singular, the amount of the thing we're talking about. And these two words are words we often see working together, so often correlatives support each other. And these phrases can get pretty complicated, as you see. So in addition to thinking of them as groups of words together, it's also important to understand their individual meanings so that we can figure it out, even if we have to do it literally. One thing to call attention to, we saw poias, what kind, and this word has to do with the quality, of course, of something. And we saw pasas, which has to do with the quantity of something. How much in the singular, how many in the plural. Now the difference here is basically the letters we have in between. The iota there is associated with quality, and the sigma there is associated with quantity. And we see this in other correlatives as well. Now for something a little different, result clauses. A result clause indicates the result of an action. In English, we often use the word that or as to start a result clause. For instance, it was so dark that I couldn't see. So dark that I couldn't see. He is so polite as to call one sir. So that and as are both used here to express result clauses. One thing to note here is this repetition of the word so. These are really correlatives here. The so and the that and the so and the as. They're related words that work together, so we often see them together. In Greek, result clauses can begin with the word hoste and be followed with either the indicative or the infinitive. And they have different meanings. This word has different meanings depending on whether it's followed by the indicative or the infinitive. Hoste plus indicative. When followed by a verb in the indicative, hoste indicates the actual results of an action, what actually happened, usually, or actually happens, or actually will happen. For instance, tasu toi eisen hoi polemioi hoste pelgamen. Tasu toi, we can have this correlative pronoun indicating the quantity of someone or something. And in this case, we're talking about the enemy. So many are the enemy. Tasu toi eisen hoi polemioi. There are so many enemies. Hoste, that, pelgamen, we flee. So many are the enemy, or the enemies, that we flee. There are so many of them that we are running away from them. Here we have an actual result. And we know that because we see hoste plus the indicative of the verb. Result clauses with hoste are usually preceded by words like tasutas, which again have to do with quantity, toiutas, which has to do with quality, or the adverb huto or hutos, depending on whether or not the word afterwards is followed by the word afterwards begins with a vowel or diphthong. So let's take a look. Huto kakoi esmen hoste pelgamen. Huto, as I indicated there, means really thus or so. So we're calling attention to how much of something someone or something is. So huto kakoi esmen, so cowardly are we. We are so cowardly. Huto kakoi esmen hoste pelgamen. We are so cowardly are we, that we flee. Again, we have a correlative, in this case adverb huto, plus our hoste, plus the indicative. And again, these phrases can get complicated, so it's important that we understand what each of the words means, as well as what the words mean together. But the important thing to note, because again, correlatives are kind of slippery, is this hoste construction. Hoste plus indicative indicates the actual result of an action. This construction is negated with u, as we might expect. U we see negating things that are or were or will be the case, or not. Hoste plus infinitive is a little different. When followed by an infinitive, hoste indicates the natural result of an action. That is, what usually or necessarily happens, or even is just intended to happen. So we're not talking about the actual result of an action, but what is expected or intended or inevitable. For instance, huto kakoi esmen hoste pelgen. So again, we have so cowardly are we, but now our hoste, our result clause, has a verb in the infinitive, pågåen. So we're not talking about what we're actually doing, but what is likely to happen. We're so cowardly as to flee. We're so cowardly that we are inclined to flee, or something like that. We're talking about a characteristic or a likely result of our being this cowardly. If different from that of the main clause, the subject of the infinitive will be in the accusative, just as we saw in indirect speech. Tasu toi eisen hoste hemas pågåen. So in this case, tasu toi, that correlative pronoun, is once again calling attention to the quantity, the number of a group of people. Tasu toi eisen, so many are they. They are so many. There are so many of them. Hoste hemas pågåen. Here we're still talking about the natural result of fleeing, but it's not they who are naturally going to flee. It is we, hoste hemas pågåen. And again, we had to specify hemas in the accusative because the subject of our infinitive here, who's doing the fleeing, pågåen, is different from the subject of what we started with, tasu toi eisen. And we were talking about them, now we're talking about us. They are so many as to make us flee. They are so many that we naturally flee, or are expected to flee. This construction is negated with me. For further reading, which I might advise in this case, you can take a look at correlative pronouns on page 51 of the grammar and result clauses, pages 177 to 178. Thank you.